Councillor Cumbers, I can confirm that we are live streaming on YouTube and it is now 6:30.
And it's now 6:30, I believe.
Yes, that's correct.
So we're ready to start, is that right?
Yes, Councillor Cumbers.
Yeah, right. I'm not quite sure whether you've reminded people, Natasha, but before I start, just to remind members that they'll be kept muted whilst others are speaking, but you will be able to unmute yourselves. All right. Now I open the meeting. Good evening, everybody. I'm Councillor Pat Cumbers and I chair Scrutiny Committee. I confirm that the following members are present and participating in this remote meeting. The following councillors: Rob Bindloss, Ronan Brown, Robert Child, Jean Douglas, Chris Evans, Chris Fisher, Elaine Holmes, and Jacob Wilkinson. I'm right there, Natasha, aren't I, with those members? Is Elaine here?
That's correct, Councillor Cumbers. Just bear with me for a moment because we just had another member join the meeting. So Councillor Evans has just joined. So Councillor Holmes is not here yet.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, we are expecting her, aren't we?
That's correct.
No, she phoned me and sorry, Chairman. She phoned me and said that obviously, considering where she is at the moment, health-wise, she's still struggling a bit, very tired, and therefore she will not be joining us today.
She has spoken to Natasha. I'm not quite sure, Chris, when you spoke to her.
About 5:30 this evening.
Was that before, Natasha?
Natasha's gone. Where is she?
Oh dear.
There she is. She's on
My
mute.
understanding, Councillor Cumbers, is that she's not coming.
She's definitely not coming because she was hoping to come for the part of the meeting earlier today, but obviously that's changed.
Yep.
Yeah, well, okay then. So now we've invited all members to take part in this meeting, and can Democratic Services please confirm which other members are in attendance in addition to scrutiny members? I can't see Natasha.
Councillor Cumbers.
Yeah.
Councillor Cumbers, it's Sarah.
I can. Yes.
I've got a list of people that are present. If you'd like me to just go down the list.
If you would, please, thank you.
It's Councillor Bindloss, Councillor Brown.
Oh, no, excuse me, Sarah. We know the scrutiny members. Is it the? Have you got a list of the other members?
They're all in the same list, but I'll try and weed them out if I can. I'll just.
No,
okay.
you carry on. If it's easier for you, you just read them all out. If it's easier for you.
Okay. Councillor Bindloss, Councillor Brown, Councillor Carter, Councillor Chandler, Councillor Child, Councillor Cumbers, Councillor de Burle, Councillor Douglas, Councillor Evans, Councillor Faulkner, Councillor Fisher, Councillor Freer-Jones, Councillor Graham, Councillor Higgins, Councillor Orson, Councillor Pearson, Councillor Posnett, and Councillor Wilkinson. Is there anyone else present that wasn't read out? If they'd like to say.
I wasn't read out and I'm present.
Councillor Glancy, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Hewson.
Oh, thank you.
Houston.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that
And that's
everyone?
it. Thank you very much. Thank you. And we also have the following Melton Borough Council officers in attendance: the Chief Exec, Ed de Coverley, Director for Corporate Services, Dawn Garton, Director for Growth and Regeneration, Pranali Parikh, Director for Housing and Communities, Andrew Cotton, Assistant Director for Governance and Democracy, that's Kieran Stockley, Assistant Director for Planning and Delivery, Jim Worley, and the Corporate Services Manager, David Scott, and welcome to you all. And of course, we also have officers from the Democratic Services team, but we have no external participants in attendance. This meeting is being held in public, and we welcome those members of the public who have joined us. Any member participating by remote link who declares an interest in any item of business in terms which require them to leave the room must ensure that they cannot be seen or heard during the agenda item. This will be confirmed by Democratic Services, and the member of Democratic Services will also confirm to the remote member when they may rejoin the meeting. Should any aspect of the conference link fail during this meeting, I will call a short adjournment of up to 5 minutes to determine whether the link can quickly be re-established. If the link cannot be re-established, the meeting will be adjourned to a later date. In the event of link failure for any individual member or members, they will be deemed to have left the meeting at the point of failure of the equipment. And if the link cannot be re-established before the end of the meeting, then the presumption will be that the meeting should continue to deal with the item, providing the meeting remains quorate. Should the meeting no longer be quorate, the meeting will be adjourned and any remaining items of business will be deferred. If the individual member's link is successfully re-established, then the remote member or members will be deemed to have returned at the point of re-establishment. I would ask members to indicate their wish to speak by raising their hand using the raise hand tool on Zoom. I will then invite each member in turn to make their contribution to the debate. Before proceeding to any vote, I will ensure that all members and officers have no further comments by confirming with the technical host of the webinar that no hands are raised. Just a little point here, of course, there'll be very little in the way of voting this evening. We will be voting on the minutes, but other things, the debate, we won't be voting on. I will ask each member to indicate when asked whether they are voting for, against, or abstaining, and that will be recorded by the Democratic Services officer. Any member who has been absent for the debate on a particular item due to link failure must abstain from voting on that item. We turn now to this evening's agenda. Apologies for absence. So we have Councillor Smith, and we now have Councillor Holmes, and any other absences. There aren't any, are there? No, that's not, I think. And we wish them, we know they're, well, we wish them both well. Now, the minutes of the meeting held on 22nd of December. I hope you've had I've sent out 2 emails, and there are 2 amendments to the suggested amendments to the minutes. The first is on minute number 82 on page 6. And I propose deletion of the 3rd bullet point from the bottom of page 6, which states any decisions that were to be made about changes to any committee or a specific part of the council, then the chairs of the committees or the members under impact would be consulted in advance. That needs to be deleted. And then some more words added to the previous bullet point. Members would be consulted regarding any changes to the way in which meetings were convened and broadcast. And then the other amendment to the minutes, it's page 7, the 3rd bullet point from the top, and part of it states there had only been 55 sold, and that needs to be, I'm proposing that that is changed to there had only been an in-year increase of 55 tickets sold currently. So those are 2 amendments, Anybody got any other amendments? No. In which case then, can I propose those minutes? And will somebody second me? That's subject to the amendments, of course.
I'll second them.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And only scrutiny members can vote on these minutes. So will you do a roll call, Natasha, please?
Yes, Councillor Cumbers, that's fine.
Thank you.
Councillor Bindloss,
4.
Councillor Brown,
4.
Councillor Child,
4.
Councillor Cumbers,
4.
Douglas,
4.
Councillor Evans,
4.
Councillor Fisher,
4.
Wilkinson.
4.
That's unanimously in favour.
That was unanimous, right?
That's correct.
Lovely, thank you. Then we go on to declarations of interest. And this comment is directed to all members who are at this meeting, not just scrutiny members. Can I please now invite members who wish to do so to make declarations of interest in respect of any items on the agenda for this meeting?
We have Councillor Orson and Councillor Brown with their hands raised.
Thank you. If you could explain then what your interests are.
Thank you, Pat. Just declare an interest, a personal interest in any matter relating to Leicestershire County Council as a member of that authority. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Ronan?
Yeah, I'll just declare an interest in any item that involves discussion of staff or budget towards staff in the community safety area, as my wife's employed in that area. So if that does come up, I will not participate in the meeting from then. Okay.
Yeah, is that a personal interest?
That's a personal interest, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, a member with a personal interest must declare the interest at the beginning of the meeting, but can take part in the meeting.
Councillor Cumbers, I've got
Yes.
my hand raised.
I've
I've got my hand raised.
Oh, I'm
Councillor
sorry.
Cumbers. I'd just like to declare an interest as a member of Leicestershire County Council.
Of course, we should have noticed. Yes, thank you, Pam.
Councillor Cumbers, Councillor Pearson also has his hand raised now as well.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Alan.
Hello, Pam, how are you? Pat, personal interest as a county councillor.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Right, now we come to the reason for this meeting, which is scrutiny of the budget and the medium-term financial strategy, which is item 4 on the agenda. We'll have 2 presentations now, and I ask that during those presentations, the only questions to be asked will relate to clarification, you know, if you've not understood something, but not to the content of the actual slides. Now, the introduction to item 4, this will be by Councillor Ronnie de Burl, the portfolio holder for corporate finance and resources. Thank you, Ronnie.
Good evening, Chairman, members. Thank you for asking us to join you at your meeting. We're delighted to be invited to present the 2021-22 budget proposals to you. In a moment, Dawn will give a presentation which will complement the papers you have in your agenda pack, which we hope will aid your understanding of what the budget proposals are and how they're arrived at. Members, this proposed budget is the culmination of a lot of hard work by officers and engagement with members. We've come a long way since the process started last September, when in those early stages, the financial position for next year was looking extremely challenging. Since then, officers have found a number of areas where the budgets could be refined. We've also had the spending review and the finance settlement. The funding received from the government for COVID is better than we anticipated. However, it can never be enough. And certainly not when we consider the huge task in front of us of supporting the community, businesses as we continue through this crisis and move into recovery. Members, the message I would like you to take away from this evening is one of a need for caution. There's a massive uncertainty about the future. We have no idea when some of our income streams will recover or what level of bad debts will have to be written off. We have no idea what the level of government funding will be beyond 2021-22. But what we do know is that our resources are limited. Clearly, the community and economy will take a long time to recover. It's reported at least a decade. And we need to be able to support the essential services we provide during that recovery. We cannot do that if we are battling to stay financially sound. We must exercise caution. By being cautious, I mean being careful with what we invest in and by how much we commit ourselves to. That is, until we are sure it can be afforded. It also means not making any harsh cuts that we do not need to make either. Patience and stability come to mind. We need financial resources to maintain our flexibility to cope with any challenges that arise. We need to ensure we have adequate reserves through the worst, should the worst occur in the future. Once the budget has been approved, we will be looking at a financial sustainability programme. We must start to identify efficiencies and income generating ideas, and in plenty of time to be considered for the 2022-23 budget and ongoing. All members should be proactive and input into this. And again, as I asked at the all-member briefing held before Christmas, I urge members to think of things that we should be willing to cut or reduce, or where they think efficiencies could be made or income generated. Not speculative items, but real ideas that officers can investigate and which members would consider should the need arise. In summary, members, it comes down to mindset, to manage council expenditure as you'd manage your own. We can't spend what we don't have. Thank you. And on that happy note, I'll pass you over to Dawn. Thank you.
I think we're just waiting a few minutes just to get the presentation loaded. Okay, thank you, members. And as the chair said, if you've got any questions of clarification, if you ask those as you go along, but keep your questions on the budget to the end. And I'm going to run through all of the papers that you've got in your pack. So everything from the revenue budget to the HRA and the capital proposals. If we could just move on, and I'll just go through the content. So that's probably slide 3, I think. Yeah, so I'm going to cover off the revenue budget for the general fund for 2021-22, move on to the medium-term financial strategy and an outlook for the next 4 years, then move on to the capital programme, and then finishing with the housing revenue account and the rent increase. Thank you. Okay, so as Councillor DeBille said, you know, we've come a long way over the last few months or even weeks even. And if you remember at that November council meeting, a number of members were very concerned about where we were going to be when we were setting the budget for 2021-22. And they had some concerns about that and whether we'd be able to balance the budget. And you can see there that on the in the medium-term financial strategy, which you approved in February 2020, we were predicting a budget gap of just 87,000, so something that would be quite manageable, really. By the time we got the pandemic and we got through to November, your senior leadership team were looking at the first cut of the budgets and a gap of over £800,000, so quite worrying times. And obviously, you know, some of that news got out to members, and quite rightly there was concerns about how we were going to manage that. as Councillor DeBille said, that the leadership team, obviously, you know, that wasn't acceptable, and we looked through it where, you know, we could focus on priorities and look to be more efficient with those budgets, and that reduced that down by over £200,000. At the end of November, we then had the spending review and a little bit more certainty about what some of the support for COVID might be, excuse me, in the next financial year. And then moving on, obviously, just before Christmas, we had the finance settlement. And again, you know, a lot more certainty around some of the funding for COVID in particular. And I think really what that just shows is that a lot can happen as we go through that process and we go through that challenge. Everybody challenges, from the finance staff to senior leadership team, members get involved, and we start to refine those estimates. And as I said, we've come a long way, because what you will have in front of you this evening on the general fund is a balanced budget position. So I think, you know, that's a tremendous achievement from where we were back in November. Then if we move on to the next slide, I think it's important just to just maybe recap on what we've got contained in the budget proposals for next year in relation to the pandemic and COVID. Because obviously now it's, you know, it's a huge impact on not just the current year's budget, but also our financial health for the forthcoming financial year. So we're still predicting that there'll be some areas where, looking at the left-hand side of that table, so we're still predicting that there'll be a loss of fees and charges in some areas as we move into next year. There's, you know, it's highly unlikely that things like car parking are going to bounce back from the 1st of April, even if we move out of a lockdown situation. It's going to take time for some of those income levels to recover. So we're predicting just under 300,000 ongoing loss next year in fees and charges. But we have had that confirmation that, sorry, I'm just trying to move my some of my blocks over so I can see the table. So we have had confirmation from the government that they are going to continue the income compensation scheme for the first 3 months of next year. So that mitigates that loss, we estimate, by about £50,000. And that continues that scheme where the government reimburses councils 75% of 95% of the loss of certain fees and charges. So that was welcome news, although as you can see, it does only cover a fraction of what we estimate we're going to lose. We're going to be losing investment income from the lower investment returns. And of course, you know, that's the situation that many businesses and individuals are facing across the country with low interest rates. And that isn't covered by the income compensation scheme because it's not a fees or a charge. But there are, as you'll see on the right-hand side there, a number of other grants unring-fenced that were announced through the spending review and the finance settlement, and they help mitigate that sort of loss and, of course, other costs and pressures elsewhere. The new homes bonus has been extended for another year, bringing in just over £100,000 additional income that wasn't in the MTFS. There was this new lower tier services grant allocated to districts, and that was just over 50,000 for Melton. And another grant was the council tax support grant. So again, recognising that more people will be claiming council tax support, and obviously that will impact on councils' yield from council tax. And again, a minor little addition to the rural services delivery grant. So that was all welcome news. We also feel as well that obviously it's really difficult to predict what some of the cost pressures will be going forward next year from COVID. You know, things like homelessness have been a particular pressure, and also obviously subsidising the leisure service. And again, you know, with this extended lockdown, are people going to suddenly go back to joining gyms, etc., en masse? So we feel that it would be prudent to have a specific COVID contingency budget, and that's largely funded, as you'll see on the right, from what we're calling the Tranche 5 COVID funding. So the government has awarded this fifth tranche of funding, and they have indicated that that will be the last round. Whether that actually is remains to be seen. But I think with that uncertainty around COVID and how soon we'll recover, I think that would be, that's the proposal in the budget, because that's a prudent one. Because I think if we were to invest that tranche of funding elsewhere and then go cap in hand back to the government saying we can't manage this ongoing pressure, that would not reflect very well on us. The next one is around lost business rates. And this is a tricky one because, again, it's really difficult to know, will we lose, will certain businesses fold? They're being supported at the moment. Will there be a number of those businesses that we lose? And also, will they struggle to pay their debts, and we could have large write-offs. So we're already seeing businesses are struggling to pay their business rates, more so than council tax. And we've estimated that at just over £200,000, but there's a lot of caution with that one, because there's a key government return that we don't have to submit until the end of this month that actually works through all of those calculations in quite a strict way, and we're still working through that at the moment, and it's very complicated this year because of COVID. So that is very much a guesstimate, an officer guesstimate at this stage, and we'll get more information once we've filled that return in. But what we're proposing to do, because of that uncertainty, is use our business rates equalisation reserve, and I'll come on more in the presentation as to the health of our reserves later. So we're broadly offsetting that estimated loss from the use of that equalisation reserve, which would actually mean would have an almost neutral position on the budget. And I think that's the right one. That's the right thing to do because of the gross uncertainty that we've got around that aspect of our income. And I'm sure that when we filled in that government return around the business rates, what that also enables us to calculate is the potential support that the government is providing for bad debts on business rates, because they're going to fund what they call 75% of irrecoverable losses. So once we've gone through that calculation, there's almost certainly going to be some government support. It's a consultation paper, so again, it's not certain how that will be worked through. So what will happen is that estimated loss of business rates could flex upwards or downwards. And then, as we know, the level of government support, once we've filled all those returns in, we'll flex the use of that equalisation reserve in proportion to that estimated loss. I know that's quite complicated, but the upshot of that is we'll draw on that reserve as much as or as little as we need to offset that potential loss in next year. And then on the council tax, a bit more certainty, I think, there about what the loss is looking like there, and also how you work out what the government support for that is. So the government has said that our loss in council tax recovery can be spread, it has to be spread over 3 years. So the third of that loss in next financial year is 22,000, and we're estimating broadly around 15,000 of that will be covered by government support. So we'll see that loss coming in over the next 3 years. And whether the government changes and provides further support next year remains to be seen. But that's the estimate at this current time. So just looking at the totals there, you can see that we're saying we think around about broadly 800,000 will be the impact of COVID on next year's budget. And that's what's been built into the proposed estimates in front of you. And of that, we've got mitigation in the form of government grants to offset quite a large proportion of that, or using reserves where it's prudent to do so. So if we move on to the next slide. So just against that as a background, so that's been incorporated into the budget. And then even though it is challenging times, we've still got some measured growth proposals in front of members, which are being proposed to go into the budget. All of them are non-recurring, so quite prudent in that way, because they won't put an ongoing burden on the council's finances beyond 1 year. Further details are contained in your pack. You'll see in the paper one of the appendices, I think it's B1 and 2, cover the savings and the growth. So a lot more detail in there, alongside the equalities impact of each of those proposals. And one of those, the Melton to Nottingham rail services link, as you'll see as we go through the numbers, we can meet that from one of our reserves, the Regeneration Innovation Reserve, because that proposed spend is in line with what members set that money aside for. Just another one I wanted to say as well on is the discretionary council tax support. So put in front of members a proposal to set aside almost half. If you remember on that previous slide, the government gave us just over 50,000 in support for additional council tax support claimants. Now we can use that to either offset the impact on our council tax income or to provide support, hardship support. So I am in discussion with the other preceptors, because obviously they're the larger portion of our council tax bill, to see if they would be willing to put in some of their grant as well, so that we could provide additional support for those in our community who are struggling to pay. So the proposal in the paper is that, subject to preceptors putting an amount in pro rata to our budget, that we provide that scheme. You know, without preempting, I think those discussions are going quite well. So it might be a different amount, but I think we'll get there and we'll get some scheme put forward. And also recognising that it is uncertain times, you'll see as well in the papers that there is that recommendation, and that you know, for things like the place survey and the town centre improvements, we wouldn't progress with that spend until we were certain that it was affordable in year. So we could hold back on that until we're absolutely certain around affordability. And then just moving on to savings proposals. So to help mitigate some of those growth proposals, next slide. We have got a number of savings proposals. So some of those are non-recurring, and some of those would actually be recurring on an ongoing basis. Again, in the appendix to the report in your pack, a lot more details and the equality impact assessment around those. So again, being prudent, we have got some vacant posts on the within the council, and we've got 3 of those where we're proposing that we actually freeze them for the next financial year. So it's just exercising that bit of caution and not taking people on into a post and then finding out that, you know, we get to November, December time and we're having to start looking at making reductions for the 22-23 budget, and then having to reduce the establishment. So that's just being prudent there and thinking ahead. And again, we can be flexible about that. And if, you know, finances are in a different position later on in the year, you know, we could always review that. But the proposal is to actually freeze those. And then a couple of ongoing recurring savings proposals. So one is to remove a modest workforce strategy budget that actually we haven't been using over the last year or two. And the other one is to actually remove a post from the establishment that we've never actually filled. And that helps mitigate those growth proposals. I will say as well that on the, you'll notice as well, if you offset one of the savings against one of the growth, that whilst we are freezing one of the economic development officer posts, we are looking to invest using as well funding from the government to invest in a different type of post around economic development as well. So that'll help us support the business community in a different way to what this post would actually do. And then if we move on, I've just done a very quick summary of what that means in terms of the overall budget position. So on the next slide. So there's a much fuller summary again in the report itself, but this is just a snapshot. So again, on the general expenses side of the general fund, there's a proposed budget of 4.8 million net expenditure, and that would be met from those income streams you see below there. So new homes bonus, business rates, council tax, and that contribution from the Regen and Innovation Reserve, to that growth proposal for the Nottingham to Melton Rail link. And I'll just pick out the carry forward. So in order to balance the budget, we're proposing a modest carry forward from the projected underspend in the current financial year, just to bring that balance, that budget down to a balanced position there. And then if we just move on to the next slide. So again, just a summary of the special expenses, Melton Mowbray. So that's been fairly stable, taking into account COVID, etc. So we've got a very similar net expenditure proposed budget compared to this year of just over £500,000, with no growth or savings proposed. And that's met by council tax and a modest draw on the special expenses reserve to balance the budget. And when we come on to council tax, you'll see why there is a need there to draw on that reserve. And again, I'm not concerned about that. There's a healthy reserve, special expenses reserve, that hasn't been used for a couple of years now. With no capital or revenue growth proposals, that's affordable. And with the housing growth predicted largely in the town centre moving forward, that council tax will very quickly recover over the next couple of years and move into no need to draw on those reserves to balance that budget. And if we move on, you can see on the next table, on the next slide, what that means for council tax increases. So you'll see there that just starting at the bottom of the table, the proposed budget is for an overall increase of £5 in the average council tax Band D equivalent. And that's in line with referendum principles for district councils, where we are allowed to increase council tax by the greater of either 2% or £5. So for us, £5 gives us the larger amount, and that represents just 2.41% overall. If you take, again, working up from the bottom, so, you know, we've got those 3 parish special expenses where we don't hold reserves. And so the proposal is to set council tax at a level that results in a balanced budget. And they're all reduced council tax levels over the previous year. And then for special expenses, Melton Mowbray, because the pressure is on general expenses on the general fund, the proposal is to actually have a reduction in the special expenses Melton Mowbray council tax level, and therefore that increase can be used to have a higher increase on general expenses. So that would mean a 4.22% increase in general expenses and an 8.78% reduction in special expenses Melton Mowbray. And I think if you compare those first 2 columns, you can see that actually the overall annual increase there per annum amounts is actually quite modest, because obviously the bulk of the council tax bills that people receive are other preceptors rather than Melton Borough Council. So if we move on to the next slide, again, just to aid your understanding, there's a full list of risks and assumptions in the papers in your pack, and I'll just pick out some of the key ones here. So I mentioned the finance settlement. So, you know, that's the that sets out all of the various grants that we receive from central government. And obviously with COVID, there was a lot more in that this year. That was announced just before Christmas, and it's what they call provisional. So it's subject to 28 days consultation, which is now closed. And following that consultation period, they take account of those responses before issuing what they call the final settlement. There has been years where that has changed, where councils have lobbied for a different distribution between tiers of government. It's been fairly stable, and I think, in fact, for the last few years, there's been no change at all over the provisional settlement. But until we get that final amount, we can't flow that into the final council tax calculations. I believe it's highly unlikely we will get that before the papers go out for the Cabinet on the 9th of February. So I'll make provision in that meeting to get delegated authority to make any minor adjustments before the council meeting at the end of February when we set the council tax. Again, assumptions, you know, I've talked a lot about COVID. So again, it assumes that they're robust. And I've just picked out two of what have been the higher areas for this year: leisure and homelessness. So, you know, some change around those assumptions can make a big difference. But saying that, you know, we've got the amount set aside as a contingency. So I think we've got a good prudent budget around COVID. Again, not just COVID related, but generally anyway, you know, you've got a large proportion of your budget is funded from grant and other income. And again, you know, a lot of those are demand led. So COVID aside, they can change and vary considerably. You know, just picking out planning income, for example, I think the budget's getting on for 900,000 a year now. So, you know, that's a large amount of money, and just a couple of applications can make a big difference. But we've got a very flexible budget management system, and we generally manage that quite well in year through a good partnership with the budget holders. Again, you know, just to reiterate what I said earlier, we're still completing that business rates return to central government, which will help us refine the retained business rates and also that government support for irrecoverable debts. And we'll just adjust that from that contribution from the reserve. Again, I think one of the higher risks is around asset repairs and maintenance budgets. Again, we've struggled with that in recent years. So it is a risk that we have. And also, again, assumptions around inflation. So we've not budgeted for any percentage increase in pay budgets. Because in the spending review, it was announced that there would only be a modest increase for those staff below a certain salary level. So we've used that to base the estimates on. And with pay being one of our largest proportions of spend, you know, any change over assumptions around pay awards can have a big impact on you know, actual costs against budget. So that is one I'd like to flag up. Councillor DeBille mentioned it earlier. So again, you know, I'm sure we'll start to see quite a lot of variations in debt recovery, and that will become more and more challenging. So again, there could be some pressure on our bad debt provisions, and I'm sure the auditors will be scrutinising that as well. And again, you know, as ever, housing growth, that's used to predict new homes bonus, but also council tax increases in the future. So again, that's a big issue and affects the estimates in front of you. And then if we move on. Okay, so again, it's always challenging trying to forward project where we might be over a 4-year period, and never more so when you've got COVID thrown into the mix alongside the government only issuing 1-year settlements. A few years ago, I think it was probably 6 or 7 years ago, you know, following lobbying from the sector, a 4-year settlement was issued. And whilst that wasn't a very healthy settlement, at least we had some certainty about where we were heading for the next 4 years. I can understand completely where the government's coming from, and trying to issue any kind of forward settlements at this current time, you know, it is impossible for them, but that just doesn't help us with our forward planning. One of the things that's been talked about for at least 2 years now is a resetting of the funding that we get, that all councils get, how that might be allocated between tiers of government, and particularly how business rates is calculated. And that's a big risk for us because we're an authority that retains additional business rates that we collect above a baseline. And if there was any change to that, that could hit us quite hard. And the next slide, which I'm not ready for yet, but on the next slide, I will go into some of the assumptions that are in there. And I know they look like really large numbers. And I think, you know, what I'm saying is really be careful around, I think as Councillor de Burgh said, it's around caution and being careful and being aware of this. And it's not necessarily the numbers themselves, but what we do and how we use those moving forward. So I'm going to say a lot of caution with some of those numbers because they're huge numbers and they're not that different to what a lot of other councils are projecting forward. So it's around being prepared, but not overreacting to those numbers. And I think if we move on to the next slide, that might give some clarity about why we're predicting those sorts of numbers. So we're assuming a £5 per annum overall council tax increase. And there is a lot of lobbying actually from the sector because I think the police are allowed to increase by £12 now. And I think the comment is that for a lot of smaller councils, actually, we should be in line with that. So we've assumed £5, but who knows whether that might change. The assumptions also make allowances for, I would say, known price increases, estimated demand changes from things like demographic or where we've seen a trajectory of upwards or downwards, and also predictions around inflation and pay awards. But they don't include any allowance for what I would say is interventions, so policy decision changes. So they're not included at all. It does allow for new homes bonus. So we've been told that new homes bonus discontinues. I think we've got one very modest payment in 22-23, and then the scheme completely comes to an end. The government has said they will consult on a replacement grant funding around which incentivise housing growth. But because there's been no consultation paper or any details, we've not been able to put any allowance into those forward projections for what that might look like. And there has been a lot of lobbying from upper tier authorities who currently only get 20% of new homes bonus compared to our 80, for there to be a larger shift in direction to upper tier authorities. So again, we've taken something out there, the new homes bonus, but we've not put the replacement in. We've assumed rural services delivery grant continues. And I think for those of you that have been involved in what was called SPARS, which is a lobbying group, there's a lot of lobbying going on around the funding for rural, sparse rural areas, whereas denser areas, cities, etc., they're lobbying against us. So again, you know, that there's a lot of fractions around that kind of funding. We've assumed that all COVID costs and income losses are discontinued from 22-23, which remains to be seen, with the exception of leisure provision, where we've estimated that will be restored at the end of 23-24. And I think the next one, the really big loss that we're predicting in 22-23 is that the government's previous consultation that they issued a couple of years ago around changing the way that business rates is calculated, with a complete reset, so that those authorities that are currently not gaining any growth actually start to get some incentive, and those such as Melton that are getting a lot of growth are actually scaled back, so as a redistribution of that wealth. And that's one of the biggest impacts for Melton. I think that works out at around £500,000 in that year of potential loss of business rates retention that we're currently getting. And that's why 22-23 is so challenging for us, and we need that clarity. And we don't know what form of transitional relief they might give us. Again, we've had no indication of that. And then a couple of forward funding ones. We know that the land charges function is now set to move to the land registry in 24-25, and therefore we'll see that loss of income. And there's been a consultation paper around mandatory food waste collection from 23-24, which would see a significant cost increase if that came to fruition. So again, two cost pressures there that we've had to build in. If we could move on to the next slide.
Dawn, I just wanted to let you know, and through Councillor Cumbers, that Councillor Carter has his hand raised, and I don't know, Councillor Cumbers, say if a member had clarification question that they could raise their hand during the presentation. So, Councillor Cumbers, did you want to ask Councillor Carter?
Yes, yes. Steve, is it a clarification you're looking for? If you want to make a comment, we would ask that you wait. Can you hear me?
I've just asked Councillor Carter if he could unmute his microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Did you hear me? What
Yes.
what I was saying was, if it's a clarification you're seeking, you don't understand something, then fine, go ahead. But if it's a question or a comment about the budget, please wait until Dawn has finished.
Mr. Chairman, I am waiting. I've got my handbook ready to ask Dawn when she's finished the presentation.
Oh, I beg your pardon. You're you're ahead of us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I can get in there. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Natasha.
Okay, so against that backdrop of what some of those dire predictions could be, as I said, it's all around not reacting but being prepared. And as Councillor de Burgh indicated in his introduction, we are looking at developing a financial sustainability programme. So that's looking at ideas for savings or income generating ideas, and starting to develop those really early around spring this year after we've got this budget sorted. And looking at such things like our asset development programme, where, if you've looked at the cabinet papers, we've already started some of that work now. And looking at things like staff transport and extension of vehicles and greener transport, and maybe looking at discretionary rate relief and any other ideas really that members have got. So, more than happy to listen to some of those and have a look at them. But we really do need ones, I think, as Councillor de Burgh said, that are real things that would really have legs, and ones that you'd be prepared to consider should the need arise. And it might be that we don't, some of those we could do anyway, because, we always want to have good value for money and be as efficient and effective as we can be. Others, if they result in reduced service offer, then they can be there and on the shelf if we need to look to do those to mitigate any losses that we might have. But I think the message I want to get, this is all around being prepared, not knee-jerk in reaction to some of those estimates. Okay, and then if we move on. So moving on to capital. So again, following the last few years, it's a very modest programme that's being proposed. This is the general fund. In your pack, you've also got the housing revenue account, which I wasn't going to go through in detail because that is pretty in line with previous years. So you've got some schemes that have already been approved in the programme and some carried forward from the current financial year. And you'll see at the bottom those new schemes that are being put forward. And again, there's quite a detailed description of also all of those schemes that are being put forward in your packs if you wanted any more information. So as I say, a very modest programme and no proposals being put forward with regard to special expenses, Melton Mowbray. And I think the next slide is quite useful because that will show what the impact is on your reserves and balances, because quite a large element of that programme is funded either from already set aside repairs and renewals reserve, where we make provision each year on an annual basis for known replacements, and also some of it's funded from grants as well. So if you look at what the projected level of unallocated reserves is, and I've just picked out the key ones, again, in the pack, there's a full listing as required of all of the reserves and balances that the council holds. So you'll see there that we've managed to stabilise some of our reserves positions. So we do have that concern that was flagged up by the SIP for Resilience Index, that we were reducing our reserves in previous years, and that's now stabilised there. And you can see that we're estimating that the corporate priorities reserve, subject to the approval of this budget at the end of 21-22, would be just under £1 million. Special expenses, as I said, very healthy considering the size of that budget of over 300,000. And then the Regen and Innovation Reserve at 69,000. And I'm exercising some caution there because that fund was largely built up from the business rates pilot that we had in 2019-20, and because of the issues that we've had with the auditors across the whole of the county area, we've not had confirmed what our income is. I know that's 2019-20, but those of you on the audit committee will know how frustrating it's been to not be able to close those accounts. And until those figures are finalised, we can't say with any certainty that money, what money we'll be getting from that pilot. But we're estimating it just under 70k unallocated there. And even after using 193,000, should we need to use that much to offset that business rates loss, still quite a healthy business rates equalisation reserve of 460,000. And that is one of those that we set that up in 2013 when we started to retain business rates. And I think most councils did that at that time, because business rates works in a cycle of sort of like a 3-yearly cycle, in the way that the amount you collect flows into and gets retained by local authorities. And you can see really large fluctuations in certain years, and that helps to kind of even that spread out. And then I think the most concerning is the capital receipts. So that's would stand at only 38,000 after all of the capital programme was funded, if that's the way you choose to go. So that just emphasises the importance of the asset development programme that's been coming forward and being considered by the Cabinet, so that we can look to where we can rationalise and dispose of some of our surplus assets and replenish those capital receipts so that we can invest them elsewhere. And then if we move on to the next slide. Yeah, and one of the other papers that will be going forward to Cabinet and then to Council will be the Housing Revenue Account budget and rent proposals. So just a snapshot here of some of the key elements of that. So the proposal is for an average rent increase of 1.49%, and that follows, I think it's social rent providers of CPI plus 1%. Which is what we are to set our rents in line with. We maintain the working balance on the housing revenue account of 750,000, and any surpluses are transferred to the reserve so that we can invest in the housing stock. There's new service charges introduced for grounds maintenance and health and safety, and that follows, I think, the strong wishes of members in previous years to look to introduce those as much as possible. And then the proposals in the budget is we will be transferring from the reserves of just over £1 million to support the ongoing housing improvement works and to maintain the working balance. And you can see there that that's just over £500,000 invested in the HIP programme, and another £500,000 for the revenue budget in year. And we are working on the 30-year HRA business plan, and the assessment of the reserves are that is affordable and gives the necessary investment that we need in our stock and our housing service. And as it says there, the additional spending in year in the revenue budget is focused on increased planned maintenance, which I think, you know, the tenants and members would welcome. I think that's the last. No, I think there's one more slide, Natasha. So yeah, so just a recap of what the next steps will be. So we'll be taking obviously all the comments of the Scrutiny committee this evening, and then Cabinet will be looking at those on Thursday, so that they can flow into the Cabinet meeting on the 9th of February. Alongside those, when Cabinet meet formally on the 9th of February, they'll be considering those revised proposals alongside the Treasury Management Strategy and Prudential Indicators, and also the Capital Strategy, all of which will be based on those budget proposals, creating that suite of reports that will then be used to calculate the council tax calculations, including all of the preceptors, and that will flow into the council meeting on the 24th of February, where the budget, the council tax and the rent is formally set. Work doesn't stop there, because then our revenues team will have the job of getting all those council tax bills produced and rents out and actioned. And then, of course, as it says at the end of there again, we'll have to then deliver against those plans expressed in the budget, and then we'll move on to developing that financial sustainability programme. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dawn, and thank you, Ronnie. Right, I think now it's the time to move on to the debate. Before I open the debate, and it'll be on items 4A to 4C, please note that we want to ensure that all members, that's scrutiny and others, have equal opportunity to share their thoughts and ask questions. I'll therefore ask each member who indicates that they wish to speak to provide just one comment or question to begin with. All questions should be addressed to the leader in the first instance, who will then identify the most appropriate portfolio holder and/or officer to answer them. I'll then move on to the next member who wishes to speak, and so on until all members have had the chance to speak or the opportunity to speak once and to put one question or comment. I'll then go round the room so members can put their second question or comment, and so on until the debate has been exhausted or the time limit has expired. On that basis, I would suggest you might, if you've got more than one question, you might want to prioritise your questions, to make sure the important ones get put to the meeting. Questions and comments should be relevant to the budget, and if they refer to a particular agenda paper, can members please tell us the relevant page number, because that can help us sort of identify what you're talking about. As Dawn said, the Cabinet will receive the budget papers at their meeting on 9th of February, and they will consider the views of the Scrutiny Committee and other members. So we're here to make comments and suggestions and ask questions, but we're not here to vote on the budget. That would be the Cabinet to do. As a council will be the ultimate decision maker and will be asked to approve the proposals at their meeting on the 24th of Feb. Now we're ready to open the debate, and I think Steve must have had his hand up for hours. Is that right, Steve? Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's page 20 of the report. And this is a question to Dawn about freezing the free vacancies. Now, I don't think the top one, to my opinion, should be freezing on the project programme officer. I think we've got a lot of programmes going ahead in the council, and like kitchens, bathrooms, windows and that, and put it on members of staff. That I think we should not freeze this post. I think we should put this post in place for this for next financial year, please, if it's possible. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Have we got any more hands up, please, Natasha?
We've got Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Evans and Councillor Graham.
Thanks very much. So can we have Jacob first then, please?
Thank you, Chair. Bear with me with this one a little bit. I noticed we were cutting some posts, one of which was around 15,000. And as the council is a landlord of a large number of properties, and we do have a large number of rolling voids throughout the year, I wanted to understand the impact that this was having on council tax returns, in particular how much this was costing the council, as we would have to pay 100% council tax for those properties which are empty. I know we're not really going to address this in this year's budget, but moving forward, what are we going to be doing? What measures are we going to be taking to ensure that voids are sped up so that properties aren't empty for long periods of time, and also bringing them up to more modern standards to ensure that those people aren't leaving because of the situation that they find their council house in.
Thank you, Jacob. Joe?
Yep.
Would you like to answer that question?
What, Jacob question?
Well, it was a comment of Jacob's that he wants.
Yeah, Jacob's question.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm going to direct that question to Alan as our expert on this, and maybe Andrew could chip in. I don't know, but over to Alan first.
Yeah. Let's first of all, again, put back in perspective the property. As landlord, the property was neglected for many years, and sadly, the reason why we have a lot of voids at the moment, we knock them back a little bit, but the more we get stuck into them, the condition of some of our properties is not the best. So the plan, as you're aware, Jacob, is that we've got housing improvement plan. We have, as mentioned by Dawn, the HRA is comfortable and basically, as of before, the money's there to do. There has been a little bit of a hold up because, of course, the COVID in regard to the kitchens and bathrooms and windows. So there is an improvement plan, and we're moving forward on that constantly. And we with Andrew, we meet on a regular basis, as you're aware. We discuss it, but it is an issue. Don't get me wrong. It's something that I believe in a short period, well, not a short period of time, but in the next 12 months we'll address, and hopefully we'll have property that's up to date and we're on top of it. But we're constantly working with TFEC, and I'm sort of on a regular basis, if not daily or every other day, talking to Andrew regarding properties and issues to do with them. So we have a plan, and I think one of the issue was mentioned a little bit by Dawn was the HRA plan. Now, in the past, we've had an annual plan, and it doesn't really make sense. The 30-year HRA business plan, which incorporates all of the improvements and everything we do with housing, is a rolling plan, which is after a year you've got it's year 6, then after 2 years it's up to year 8. You review it every 5 years, so it's just not an annual thing. It's a long-term plan. So we really get stuck in to make sure and ensure that our properties stay are in top quality, and we're constantly on top of it. But we're getting there. But it's not something that'll happen overnight. I hope that answers the question, Jacob.
Pat, can I just come back quickly, because it is linked to that, but it's also to do with council tax.
It's got to be absolutely relevant to that question.
It's also to do with council tax exemption and its impact on the HRA account, because those properties are void, we are paying the council tax for those properties, which is then going to other authorities, which is a detriment to our own HRA budget. Does that make sense?
It does.
You know what I mean?
That side, I agree. That side of it, I think Dawn or Andrew would be better, or David even, to answer that what happens to the council tax, how it's collected, or if we're losing council tax, what happens. Over to you, Dawn.
Yeah, I could just answer. We've got the figures for 2019-20. That the extra amount of voids for council tax was 15,500 cost to the HRA, but that was 2019-20. We will repeat that exercise at the end of this financial year to understand the cost for that, but I understand it's not that easy to do until you get to the year end.
Right, thank you. Thanks, Dawn. Yeah, can we go on now to Councillor Evans, and a page number if possible, or relevant?
Or relevant. If I could, I would. I'm afraid, Chair. It isn't on a page number. It's part of Dawn's. Well, it probably is somewhere, but when there's so many pages, it's on the general expenses and special expenses that have been presented. Obviously, anybody looking at that can see there has been a significant swing away from special expenses to boosting general expenses on the percentage. In other words, the general expenses have gone up by about 4.2%, and I noticed that the special expenses have gone down significantly for Melton, the town, and for other ones. Obviously, my concern is what's the justification for this? Because obviously each year the special expenses against the general are justified by us and the cabinet. And yet there seems to be a significant swing this time to put the onus more on a general expense rather than special. And obviously the special, especially in the town's position, is to reflect the amount of money that is spent on the town. So why is we spending less on the town this year than we did last year? Because that's what's being reflected in the change of the expenses. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Joe, who would you like Dawn to answer that?
Well, Dawn and Ronnie, between them, they're the appropriate of finance team. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Dawn probably has the best steer on it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, what we've tended to see over the last few years is that the actual expenditure on special expenses has stabilised. It's not actually reduced, it's almost stayed the same and kind of levelled off. And we've seen less growth proposals come forward, or investment proposals, for want of a better term, coming forward as well. We've also seen some, I think it was last year or the year before, we had some increases in income as well on cemetery, where the charges were way below what was being charged in other authorities, and that saw quite a boost of income to special expenses. Also as well, you need to remember that if we get more houses built in the town centre, which we have been seeing in previous years, particularly recently, then that increases your yield, so to speak. So even if you don't increase council tax, you get more council tax income because there's more properties on which are paying that council tax. So what that's seen really is that the additional growth in housing and the council tax that brings in, coupled with the additional income from fees and charges, has covered the inflationary increase on special expenses, but it doesn't seem to have been suffering from the same kind of cost pressures over and above inflation that the general fund has been seeing. So therefore, what we've done, because we've got that flexibility, the proposals to members has been, rather than increasing council tax on special expenses just to put it into a reserve where there's no plans to use that reserve, actually use that growth potential to increase the council tax on the general fund and get the resources into that. Otherwise you'd have to be cutting services, and those services would be cut for everybody across the borough, not just those living in the rural areas, it'd be those in the town as well.
Yeah, could I just come back, Chair, on that? Obviously, from my point of view, and obviously we are a divided 50. I'm used to this. It's the same in Rushcliffe, where West Bridgeford didn't have a parish or town council, and where there were special expenses. There was every year, and there was every year in Rushcliffe, there was a concern whether the special expenses were really covering what was spent in the town against what were the rural areas. Dawn, you've used some things like building houses. Bottisford, as you know, at the moment is getting massive amounts of housing, and you're putting its general rate up significantly. So I can't see that that won't go down well with the residents of Bottisford, who are seeing an increased council tax and no extra services. I notice there's nothing in that budget for Bottisford, for instance, or the rural areas. In the capital expenditure, that's what I will get coming back to me, and it's quite a reasonable statement. Why, are you reducing the special expenses for the town and increasing it for everybody? That, to me, I'm struggling still to see a justification, I'm afraid, Dawn.
And Dawn, did you want to say something further, or are you happy just to take those comments to Cabinet?
We can just take those comments. I mean, I think I don't have concerns that we're disproportionately undercharging special expenses at all. The categorisation of what is classed as a special expense is determined by council. So, we can just take those comments away.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Graham. And a page number if it's relevant.
it isn't really relevant, Madam Chairman. I discussed this with you earlier and Councillor de Burgh. I think one point, can I ask that the £1,000 plus underspend from the mayor's budget be carried forward to the next mayor? The budgets for the mayor are very tight, and I'd like to feel that during a year they'd be reviewed anyway. But my immediate request is that the £1,000, I think is about £1,300. I can't see anything else being spent on it between now and the AGM, be carried forward so that the mayor can actually use them himself in the coming year. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And yeah, I'll make a comment on this if I may. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think we've seen recently some of the expenses which come under the mayor's budget, they come out of the mayor's budget. And I think that they are things that we would do anyway, you know, sort of flying the flag. And so I'm not quite sure whether it's really fair taking them out of the mayor's budget. But as well, I know because we had a similar discussion a year or two back, and I think people value the mayor, you know, especially children. Is a lovely link between children and the council, you know, and I think it's something which is precious and should be encouraged. And as well, what we mustn't forget either is other values of the mayor. Can you remind us, please, Melise, how much fundraising you've managed this year, despite COVID?
Well, over 2 years, because it was 18 months ago, I flew myself out of an aeroplane and the rest of my family, which raised £27,668. But above that, there's another £7,000 or £8,000, so about £35,000. We've raised 4 rainbows, which would only have been able to be done under the umbrella of being mayor.
Yes.
So I'm extremely grateful for that, and I think rainbows are as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure they are. And of course, it's little ones, it's children and young adults that get that superb care at Rainbows. And you're right, we don't give anything to Rainbows. We give nothing apart from via the mayor. So I think we should bear that in mind. Yeah, I've had my say. If other people want to.
Thank you very much. Just to say that there are several children who use the raised-based services from our borough.
Yeah, I'm sure. I was confident of that. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Have we got some more hands raised, please, Natasha?
Yes, Councillor Cumbers. We've got Councillor Child, Councillor Brown, Glancy, and also Councillor Orson.
Councillor Child, Councillor Brown,
and Councillor Glancy. Councillor Orson has his hand raised. I don't know if he wanted to come back on Councillor Graham's previous comment.
Yeah, please, could you, Joe, please, as leader?
No, it wasn't so much about Councillor Graham's comments at all there, actually. Councillor Graham's comments will be noted, and I'm sure Councillor de Burgh will support that as well. Could I just get your confirmation with that, Ronnie?
Yes, Lady, you can. There is no, the budget has been increased on this budget by around £600. But in addition, the underspend from last year is no problem moving that across. So that answers to a certain extent, I think, Councillor Graham's request in the short term. Perhaps, you know, there'll be further discussion on this matter, but I hope that answers your question, Melise.
Thank you, Ronnie. It does. The £600 is merely to support the Remembrance Day service and replace those services that used to be supplied by the British Legion. So I know that is, and it is very important. No, it does, and I would like to think that early on in the new year, the role of the mayor and his budget is discussed by cabinet or council or someone. Thank you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, you know, because, and especially the finances, and we really need to look and think, why should those particular finances come from the mayor's budget? Anyway, if we can go on now, we've got Councillor Child. We can't hear you.
Realise that. Can you now, Pat?
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Bob.
I've been having a look at the corporate costs finance budget, and I noticed that the audit fees have been increased by exactly £20,000, which makes me feel a bit twitchy, from 49,000 up to 69,000, which is a 40% increase on the year. In view of the fact that the last year's accounts are still awaiting to be signed off, how has this figure of 20,000 been arrived at? Or is it at this stage a best guess figure? And what is the rationale behind this increase, and could it be refined downwards slightly? Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Sounds like you, Dawn, is it? Or is it Ronnie?
No, I think it's Dawn's expertise here, I think. Pat.
Thank you.
Like a lot of the estimates, exactly that, it's an estimate. Yes, we haven't closed the 2019-20 accounts. We know that we paid more for 2018-19. We know that the auditors have spent considerable extra work in 2019-20. And we've also had a review by Sir Tony Redmond has been done nationally into the quality of audit. And that is recommending that there is a need for greater audit involvement and of a higher quality, and that we know that fees are set to go up. There's been quite a lot of communication from public sector audit appointments that appoint the auditors for local government, and they are saying that audit fees will go up, and that's part of their consultation papers. How much that actually goes up by remains to be seen. But based on all of the reading that we've done and the discussions, that's the finance team's best estimate. I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't enough, to be honest. However, I can't remember the paragraph, but there is something in the papers as well. We are awaiting as well the potential for some additional funding from government in response to that review by Sir Tony Redmond. But again, until the government finalises its response to his report, we're left in a little bit of limbo. So yes, you could revise it down, you could revise it up, and we could be short or we could have too much. It's just a best estimate, like most of the estimates in the budget.
Thank you, Dawn. Ronan.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. Okay, so the sort of areas the area that I want to focus on is around what we've been talking about for the last 12 months, which is how we're going to help our community recover and our businesses more so, and our town. And I've been reading the papers, and just before I start, as I have to say, is I think we are in a really good position. It's probably one of the best recoveries of getting things sorted out that I've seen. So well done to Dawn and the team, and pass that on. But coming down to the nitty gritty of things, it is good to see that we are thinking about it, and some of the work we've done over the last 12 months has been quite remarkable, really. But going forward is going to be tougher. And what on page 41 we mention a little bit about a bit of investment into the town centre of 50,000, which is more than welcome, but I think it's not enough. I think we could try and do more, because when we come to try and bring people back in, I think we should be doing all we can to get as much of our own money into it, and not just obviously depend on government money, and that might mean making hard decisions. So I'd like to know what else or where we could maybe go and look for that, or where Cabinet could look for that. And then following on from that there, it's really good to see on page 55 again reference to the rural business diversification grants of £100,000, and that's great. We need to be helping businesses, and we need to be helping those that have got the best chance of surviving. I know that we have ARG grants, and I think we're rolling some money over, if I'm reading it right. The additional restriction grants, that's for everybody else. But I would just like to get from officers or stroke, maybe it's the portfolio which Councillor Higgins, is what more than what we've already doing there, what scope is there for the council to do more to actually help business? And if need be, if we could cut expenditure somewhere else, what could we do to really pump some more of our own money into really trying to help our businesses not just in rural areas, but also across the whole of the borough, mainly the town, to try and help them out of this crisis. Bearing in mind, we're expecting that probably government help and assistance is going to probably reduce or dwindle. So that's my question, and I'll pass that back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Ronan. Joe, do you want Lee to answer this question?
Yeah, I'll direct that to you, certainly.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Councillor Brown, for the question. Yeah, you're right. I'll just talk about the point you specifically raised, the economic development on page 41. That was, I think it's quite well in defining the detail there. That was obviously deferred for COVID, along with rural pub grants. And if members of the public are watching, or those who do have pubs in the rural areas, Melton Borough Council had set aside grants for rural pubs, namely for diversification. And Councillor Brown, I know you talked about the Bell at Frisbee, that they wanted to use potentially the money to improve disabled facilities and access, so they could improve their customer base. And then obviously, just as we were all about to launch that, then COVID struck and pubs were closed, and the difficulties that was. The other reason around from the rural side, and I did note what Councillor Evans was saying, is, what monies are going into the rural area. This is something that is for that, because we would like to see more bed space, for example, for overnight accommodation. We're looking at a reset and a vibrant new tourism offer, which is why we've just taken on a new tourism officer, Councillor Brown, as well, which not just will look at the rural area, but the town as well. So while you'll see the economic development in there for that, which is also to prepare a town centre vision and master plan, working with the place board partners, because I think we need to get that in place before we just spend money. The tourism officer is also just trying to get the footfall into the borough, and it's not just obviously the town centre, it is also the rural area. You'll see a lot of businesses are working together now, March House Farm, for example, and then they're linking in with equestrian centres, and then obviously where people can stay overnight as well. We recently had at the Stag and Hounds at Borough on the Hill, they've just been awarded last night a Michelin Bib Award, which I think will feature in this week's Melton Times. So it's to have something of an offer of that. You're saying about what can we do more for the town centre as well. We do have partners, which includes the town estate and the Melton Bid. So while the Melton Borough Council is willing to put more investment in the town centre, it's not the only stakeholder or the go-to stakeholder on its own. Obviously the bid it has some significant funding from its own payers there, and it does some good work in there. And also, obviously, the town estate is obviously a major stakeholder. The other thing that the council has done is significant investment in the cattle market site. And that's just not, what we've done in the past, but we're looking to do, the work on the kitchen, and then working with Brooksby Melton there, which I think is important. And that's to bring the rural and town centre together. So I know Pranali's on, she might want to talk about that in a little bit more detail. I don't know if there's anything specific about that, but just going on to the government grants, and I know you mentioned about government grants. This week, the council have paid out 1.4 million to businesses this week for their grants. The grant panel, which myself and Dawn headed out, looked at hundreds of more businesses for the ARG grant. And a lot of businesses will receive those payments this week and going into next week. And just on that as well is, while the government were asking for some of the money to be retained by councils, including this council, because they gave us, as Dawn was saying earlier, they give us an amount of funding and said this will have to last you until the end of the restrictions or COVID itself. That was a few weeks ago, and I think a lot of things have still changed. And obviously there's the budget from the Chancellor on March the 3rd, that might provide some more funding. But what the government have said to us in the last week is they do want more funding to go directly to businesses. So what you're saying is to hold some back for regeneration from the ARG. The government has slightly changed the direction on that, and whether we get more money in the future, I don't know, but it's something I can't commit to at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Did you want to say anything, Pranali?
I think Councillor Higgins summed it up quite well. Just one point I would like to make here is that there is also something about being prepared for future, because we know that the government is looking at a couple of large pots of funding coming through, like the UK Prosperity Fund and the Levelling Up Fund. So when that comes into place, what Councillor Higgins mentioned, some of the expenses from what we are working on now using the ARG fund or the other grants funding is to get ready for that. So the town centre master plan could be one example where having that master plan could prepare us for those future opportunities that are likely to be just around the corner. So yeah, rather than committing everything at a time, at this point in time, it is about being ready and making it a sustainable pot of funding for the rest of this difficult period, which we know that it's not going to end just in a few weeks' time. So that's where we are at with that.
Thank you very much. Before I bring in Margaret, can I just say something? Of course, on my ward, Dorian ward, we've got Kettleby Lakes, and they're regular national award winners. And people have got to have reasons to come to Melton, and they've got to have somewhere to stay. And I don't know whether this might be a good time to be trying to encourage more people to do bed and breakfast. You know, explain to them what they need, and so that when things do open up again, you know, that there is more choice for places to people to stay. That's just my point of view. Can we move on now to Margaret Glancy, Councillor Glancy?
Hi, thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I think this is going on from the sort of previous comments by Ronan. I'll refer you to page 19 of the pack. It stresses the importance of to improve the street furniture, planting and other options to ensure the town centre remains an attractive place to visit and shop, and it's best placed to support the recovery. Well, in my mind, it's never been more important than now to improve these things, and I was really glad to see this actually on page 19. However, when I turned over to page 21, I saw that it was probably, well, perhaps in jeopardy. Because under item 4.4.4, it should be noted that expenditure for the following growth proposals will not be incurred until certain conditions are reached as set out below. So I totally understand that. And the first one was the town centre improvements. Now, if we want to improve our town and our borough for everybody, I do think that the improvements to the town centre are absolutely paramount. And it's about improving the high street. It's about doing something for everybody, not just a small proportion of people. And it will, in fact, increase our tourism income and our car parking income, which I note we mentioned, I think you mentioned, Dawn, in your presentation, that this was due to be, well, we think it's going to be less than normal. So also, I know there's extra funding within BID. They probably spent hardly anything this year and last year, so there may be some money there. So I would implore us to actually do something more and to make sure this does happen. And I know it's a huge ask, but it's something for everybody to benefit. And it's been such an awful year, as everybody obviously knows. But this is something positive moving forward, and it will have a benefit for everybody involved. That's just my main point. Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. Thank you.
Councillor Higgins, but
yeah. Lee.
Thank you, Leader. I might need the backup of the finance guy. You always need the man with the money, but it's a good question, Margaret, and it's a really good point raised. And I think, like you say, with what Councillor Brown said earlier. So you're right. You're right to raise it and the importance of it. I think really, obviously, the paper is highlighting what the risks are, and while this same paper probably presented last year, we were expecting to do it last year, and then we were expecting also to announce and start funding pubs, for example, rural pubs, so they could diversify, so they could get that overnight accommodation Pat was mentioning. Then COVID hit, which was just this huge tsunami of doubt, and which, you know, is affected everything that we know at the moment, and obviously the confidence in the economy and everything else. So what I think the risk is trying to highlight, Councillor Glancy, is yes, we are committing to it, and we are committed to that project. If finances are hit by further tidal waves, so for example, when we were drafting this budget, we don't know how many people will start to suffer from council tax, who can't pay their council taxes, for example. Businesses might start going bust, I think as Dawn mentioned before, which could undermine the entire part of the budget. So to keep the council's lights on, so to speak. And so that's why it is highlighted as a risk. What Pranali and her team have done, which we set them the challenge, is could the town centre improvements, for example, could they be used by the government grants for the ARG monies? So could we have used the government money first and then commit more, you know, give you a stronger commitment? And at the moment, we don't think we can. And so that's why it's reliant on the general fund. And that's why we would rather highlight the risk that it may not be done straight away, but subject to everything finance is working, and Ronnie giving us the go ahead, we're still committed to it.
Thank you very much. Natasha, have you got some more names, please? Are there some more hands up?
Yes, we've got Councillor Douglas and Councillor Fisher.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Jeannie.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, interesting that a lot of councillors who have spoken so far are mentioning the economic recovery and the importance of it. It really is dominating the theme here. And I also am going to ask a question relating to that. So, you know, this is the focus, I think. On page 20, freezing the vacant economic development officer post, I was quite concerned about this because obviously in the light of the local lockdowns and the negative impact on the local economy, I did feel that there would be a strong need for this post, if not immediately, then moving forwards over the next few years. At least if we really are cost cutting, could we consider alternatives, councillor working parties and so forth. I know that we already have started this in our scrutiny committee work with the task and finish group, with both the people and the place department. So we are already doing this as councillors, but I just think that taking somebody on is realistic in terms of that. I am sure that they'll be able to cover their own cost as they're helping to develop the economy in Melton over the next few years. So it's not so much a question, it might be more of a comment. Maybe we just ought to keep an open mind with, you know, what posts we're cutting and whether they really are needed, because I do think they would cover their own costs if we kept that on. It's don't know if anybody wants to say anything about that, but thank you.
Joe, would you like
to? Yeah, could I ask if Pranali could come in here, please?
Yeah, thanks, Pranali.
Yes, thank you, Leader. The Economic Development Officer post, which is well, proposed to be frozen for just 1 year, that's very much in response to the COVID. So what we think is that the way the current post is designed, it's not really helping to react to what we need to do in terms of the reacting to the impact of COVID, like dealing with the grant scheme. We are getting all this funding from government and it's taking a lot of time time, a lot of resource from the various teams within the council to deal with those grant payments. So what we are proposing is using the additional restriction grant funding to get somebody to work on those grant schemes, so we can deal with those grant applications quicker, faster, more efficiently, and help the businesses in that way, rather than trying to employ an economic development officer. So we are focusing on where the need for the current time is, and that's only for 1 year, hoping that by the end of 1 year, we would be out of this situation, and then we would continue with the regular post as we have planned. So that's just a stopgap arrangement.
Through you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Pranali, for that. It is a realistic answer, and I'd just like to think that we will get one at some point in the future, the Economic Development Officer post that's been filled. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to page 19, the non-recurring general fund growth proposals. I'm just interested to find out what information we hope to gain from the place survey, and also, is the £15,000 spend on this survey an estimate or an actual costing? I don't know who's best to answer that one.
Neither do I. Is that one for you, Pranali?
Or Lee?
One for Dawn.
It would be
Dawn. It's more Dawn,
Alison
is
or
it?
me. I don't know if Alison wants to say anything first, but I can answer as well.
Can you just reword that question for me? Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, basically, I was just interested to find out what information we hope to gain from the place survey, and also, is the £15,000 spend on this survey an estimate or an actual costing?
I can't answer about the estimate or actual costing, but the place survey is something we do every 2 years.
Yeah.
So it's what we send out to sort of get information from a range of consultation areas, and it's seen as part of the Melton deal. So if you had any information or been part of what's been talked about with the Melton deal, looking at the stakeholders and the strategy, the way we go forward, how about the community and stuff like that. So it's something that would marry to that, but we do it every 2 years to sort of ensure that we know what our community is doing and where where our demographics are and things like that. I think I've answered that okay. But yeah, the actual, whether it's an estimated cost, that's why we're proposing to maybe just sort of not sort of push that forward a little bit, so we can keep it out of the budget for the current time if we need to, but we still need to do that survey. Dawn, I don't know whether it's an estimated cost or an actual cost.
Yeah, it's estimated, but it is based on what it cost us last time. So as the councillor said, that would have been 18 months ago now that we paid for that. So it's based on the previous one. And I think the beauty of it is you get that direction of travel. So you start to see if some of the things, so last time it informed our corporate strategy. And obviously now if we repeat that again this year, we can start to see if some of the activities that we've been undertaking as part of that corporate strategy, is that starting to make people feel more satisfied, or are they looking for something different now? And I think with COVID, this will build on some of the work that Scrutiny has been doing with their surveys, to try and see if as a result of COVID people's needs and some of the engagement that they want to do with this has changed and shifted. So it's quite an opportunity really. We're on the backdrop of COVID and the work that Scrutiny's done, and again the survey that we did 18 months ago.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Alison and Dawn.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any more hands up, are there, please, Natasha?
Yes, we have Councillor, I've got Councillor Child, Councillor Orson, Councillor Fisher.
Joe, did you want to sort of
It was just to add on to Chris's question, actually. It is an interesting one, Chris, that is, because as my cabinet colleagues will back me up, but I did look at that myself for effectively saving or cutting, whatever you like to call it. But one thing, it also can help to point to efficiencies that could be found, i.e. What doesn't, it's a little bit like grass cutting. It's a very simple issue, but it's one that residents hold value to, obviously, but it's an easy saving to be found. So it gets a good indication on how popular that service is or how unpopular it is. So it's useful for pointing, as well as all the other things, to find inefficiencies as well. It will also be very useful to an incoming council in, let's be honest, just over 2 years' time. They will also find it interesting. So it's also to help set up the next council as well. Thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Now we've got Bob Child and Chris Fisher, but there are some members who haven't spoken yet. So would any of them like to say something now? No, in which case then we'll go on to the second round.
Councillor Cumbers.
Yep.
Just so that you know, Councillor Glancy's actually put her hand down now, so it is just Councillor Child, but Councillor Bindloss has just raised his hand, and I don't believe he has spoken.
No, he hasn't, so no, that's fine. Rob, yes, please.
Yeah, it's just in relation to Chris's previous question. I think if you look at priority 6 on the corporate strategy, it will give you a much better idea of exactly what that's all about. That was all, really. Thank you.
Right, thanks for that, Rob. So now we can go to Councillor Child.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Community service grants. I've looked at this service, and over the last few years, the amounts provided by the council as annual grants has decreased from a high of 74,000 in 2018-19 to an estimate for next year of only 44,000. As a council, should we be budgeting to increase the sums available to the communities from this account instead of reducing them? And could this be go to Cabinet for the 9th of February to review it and maybe have a list of which grants are available to which communities? Thank you.
Thank you. Joe, is that Alison's area?
Yes, it is Alison's area. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with your point, but there was quite a lot of work that went into looking at the community grants a couple of years ago, where we had to make some cost savings, and it was decided that this was one of the areas that was going to reduce. So what the work that went into that, because of that reduction, was to look at where we were spending that money, and initially we were only spending it in 3 different places, and it was just like repeat funding for the same 3 organisations. We had a lot of discussion about it because some of the organisations weren't providing any feedback, they weren't providing any value for money, they weren't providing any data to back up where they were spending the money. So Aisha put a lot of work in with her team to come up with a new structure and the way we disseminate the community grants. So there's a whole process that goes into it now, and organisations from across the borough can bid and put forward applications to receive part of that funding. So every year it's going to be there's going to be different organisations that benefit from that. They've just gone out the second year of this new community grants policy has just gone out, and we are reviewing at the moment all the organisations that have been successful, and they put some there's quite a range of organisations now that benefit, and that has a much more wide-reaching impact in terms of what we can do as a borough council. It would always be brilliant to have more money to give out to organisations, and I get your point in this current climate, should we not be increasing that? But I think the last year and definitely this year, I think we've proved that even with a small amount of money, we've been able to impact rural areas, town areas. We've been able to impact one-off projects, looking at different age ranges, leisure. It's just massive, and it's really effective. each year when we look at the who receives those grants, not everyone's successful, because we look at how much the community benefits from the money that we're giving out. Scrutiny did have a presentation on this. I think Pat can attest to that, from last time, about how we dished out the money, what organisations were successful, and that sort of information is widely available. I think it's just it's going to be ready to present, I think, soon. I don't know if it's coming to this
cabinet, I believe.
Yeah, it's coming to this cabinet, and you will see that the work that goes into it and how the projects are impacting on the community. Some of the technology projects, it's really good and it's really effective. And if we're in a position where we've got extra cash, then yeah, we could increase it. But there's also part of it that it's not just about giving the money out; it's about giving support out to these organisations, helping them to be self-sustaining, helping them to direct them to different funds that are out there in the community. So some organisations could actually benefit just by applying for the money and seeing where else they can get access to funds from. We don't want to use that money to be like to pay people's overheads. We look quite in depth to what they're using that money for, and each year there'll be lots of different organisations. If we're in a difficult time, and if we had more resources and we put more time into the community lottery, that was one of the areas where we were hoping to boost and benefit that project, so to be able to input more funds into the community grants so that we could then disseminate more money to more organisations. But so that's, I know it's not answering your question about increasing the money, but I hope I've answered the question in terms of ensuring that you feel that it has a benefit and an impact into the community, the way that we have designed it now.
It's nice to hear that it'll have a benefit, Alison, but I do feel we need to get it back up to the 18-19 level, because it's dropped nearly half, and I'd like to think that the cabinet will consider this. If they can't do it,
yeah, I agree. We can take it back to cabinet and discuss, but I think the way that the grant systems run now is a lot better than it ever was. There wasn't a lot of thought put into it. It was just there were certain organisations that got given money from Melton Borough Council without any sort of project plan, without any understanding the impact. In terms of what you know about the way that the community grants is run now, then what would extra money do?
Well, it will certainly boost their financial position in this.
Their meaning who? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Sorry?
Their meaning who? Because the organisations that apply to the community grants part are all in the main successful in getting what they want. Maybe not all the money they want, but they are successful in getting quite a substantial amount towards their project. So if there was more organisations applying, then I'd see an increase as a justification. But if the organisations that are applying are finite, having more money in the pot is not actually going to add more benefit to those organisations, if that makes sense.
I take your point, but I would like to see it maybe an advertising campaign to try and get more communities interested in the grants available.
Yeah, but you do understand my point that we don't just offer money, we also offer support.
Oh yeah, I knew that, Alison. Yeah, I did know that.
You knew that, okay.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Could I just ask Alison a question? And in the past, Alison, organisations looking for funding were expected to follow an SLA, a service level agreement. In other words, they would agree, the council would agree to fund them, but the council would give some targets to them, so that they really what the organisations were doing would help the council as well. Because I do know, and I don't want to name a particular charity at the moment, but there has been a huge, a big charity, a national charity, which had funding for years and years, and yet was providing very, very little information about what they were doing. A lot of it we were having to guess and having to assume. A responsible organisation, you know, so, but service level agreements, which we had in the past, and they did seem to work well. I'm talking about some years back, but now they were abandoned. I mean, do you think that they could be a good idea?
Talking about service level agreements on money that we're giving out to organisations sort of predates me in terms of my area of responsibility. I do understand the benefit of the impact of a service level agreement, but that's sort of looking at the way that we dish money out in a different way. We're not giving money out to these community organisations for them to offer a service to us. The way that the application form is worded is they give financial information, they give details of the project, they say what their impact's going to be, what the benefit to the community is going to be, and we're offering that money out to that organisation on that basis. So I'd understand if we were, like you said, a number of years ago, when we had high levels of finance to give out to organisations that were acting on our behalf, to give out a service level agreement. But in terms of the way that we're, giving out the money towards the projects that we do, service level agreements aren't a necessary part of that process. There's a lot of information detailed in every application that gives us a really clear guidance as to where that money's going, what the project's going to be. And we want to ensure that there's a bigger impact into the community that's helping support these community organisations than just offering it to somebody to say, here, I'll do this for us. They're just given out in a different way, and it's just has a better impact. We offer a lot more. If you think about the wide range of support that officers give to organisations, and a lot of the good community work that's sprung up since we've had COVID, there's a lot of organisations that are doing the work that we're supporting them to do, without even giving them money. So I agree with your point for that organisation that we're talking about, but we've probably moved on a lot since that point.
The point I'm making really, it's not asking them to sort of do anything which is too bad, but as an example, encouraging them to take on volunteers, to train volunteers, that sort of thing, which a lot of them do anyway, but sometimes they don't always think much about that. But
no, but a lot of the work that we've been involved in, and Lee will attest to this, is we've been offering that sort of support to some community organisations. As it stands, we've been offering that to help them make sure they've got the right volunteers, they've got the right rules in place. So we are doing that in the background. It's just something not everyone's seeing all the time.
No, that's really good. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, Councillor Fisher.
Sorry, my hand should have been lowered. I think it is now.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
It is now, yes. We've got Councillor Higgins and Councillor Brown.
Who have you got, Natasha? Sorry.
Councillor Higgins and Councillor Brown.
Oh, right. Lee, then, please.
Yeah, it was just it's an important public information point, but going back to Bob's question in a way, and then obviously in normal circumstances, Alison answered it brilliantly there, but just to talk about the grants that you can apply for the councillor. The Mayor, Councillor Graham, recently put forward, I won't say the group, but I'll talk about them in general terms, to ask what grants were available, because the government sends this information out near enough on a weekly basis. And I'd like to pay tribute to our officers, and namely Lee Byrne and Nick Sachs and Maria Ramshaw on this, because you've got to be, there's so much information going out all the time, as you probably can appreciate, Councillor Child, but the organisation that the Mayor put forward, and then so I had a conversation with them, and the first thing is they didn't know what they could apply for. They didn't even know anything about it, because they were a community group. They didn't see themselves as a business for a business grant. And I don't know specifically, for example, I don't know specifically what they will get awarded, but the grants that they could apply for, and I would suspect they would very strongly secure, are grants of £7,573.21. And from not applying for it to just a phone call with the mayor and then putting it forward to me, they have put an application in, and if they could secure over £7,500, that's a huge boost for them. And I know Councillor Brown, who is affiliated with the Frisbee Rotherby Cricket Club, that they've applied to these grants and they've been successful in there. So councillors, and if anyone is watching this, if you're involved in charities or community groups, then you can apply for the business grants, and you might just be successful, and there can be some significant money that's there, because the government, does allocate this for that. Just on the other point that Alison raises as well, and the bits behind the scenes, is what we're seeing in the growth and regen is we're seeing a lot of business owners who are really struggling at the moment. And when I say struggling, is they probably be cash asset rich, but all of a sudden their income has just stopped. And while everyone just thinks that sending a food parcel out is what helps, is these people don't necessarily need food parcels. They need bigger support around them, because they've never touched the welfare state before. And they're in real dire circumstances, some of these business people are. And I'm talking about people who probably own their own house or whatever. But if you don't have 50 quid coming in for that week, you still can't buy food by saying, I don't have a mortgage, I've got a £250,000 house or £500,000 house. So this, as Alison was saying, we're seeing our officers working on that kind of support, which, this evil virus has impacted on. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Ronan.
The things just to finish off is that if we just look at an example of some of the work that's been done successfully on the housing revenue account around service charge income and bringing income in, that originally, if we went back 18 months ago, myself and Alan sat with Ed, and I think some people said to us, oh, you can't do it, it's not possible, etc. And I know I've been trying for about 15 years to try and get some of those charges in. But we did it, and Andrew's come in, and it's making a positive impact. There's about 100,000 of extra revenue income, and I think this could be something which I think Joe's already doing anyhow. But just to clarify from him, and he's probably, if he doesn't, he'd be committed to it, I imagine, is that if we look at similar exercises to continue for the general fund and look at how we can get income in a different way, and not for this budget, but to work it through for the next 12 months. To look at where we might lose income and where maybe we could replace that income, and be a little bit more strategic about how we're going to bring that income in, which then could generate the taxpayer in the town. So I would ask for that to be welcomed. And I'm just going to finish off just to say that I will reiterate my point is that I would encourage the Cabinet to look at, and the officers to be proactive and innovative, and go further and look at new ways post-COVID or coming out the back end of how we as a council can use our own resources to help our own business and our own people that Lee's just referred to, who may have been working and are not used to claiming benefits, etc., who need that extra help and support. And some of that might be more signposting, etc. I do think we're going to see more people like we did in the financial crash. I worked through that. That was quite horrific times, and people got through it because they got the support and the help, and we just need to do that. And it's all right saying wait for it. We know what's coming. Let's prepare for it. And that's, I just want to make those points. But the first question is over to you, Joe. Would that be something that you'd be willing to look at around those reviews?
Yes. You're okay, Pat. I mean, obviously, we've had private conversations about this, Ronan, as you well know. And yeah, you have my assurance. I'll continue, or we will continue. Sorry, I hate the word "I," as you well know. The Cabinet will continue searching. There's no doubt about that. Because, as you pointed out, the HRA, as Andrew's found, that extra 100k. I mean, it's made a massive difference to that spend. No doubt about that. So yes, in other words.
Councillor Cumbers, could I just quickly jump in there just to back that up? I think what I would also draw your attention to is the reference in Dawn's presentation to the financial sustainability programme. So that's very much about trying to get on the front foot of this stuff. So as soon as we put this budget to bed, we want to be starting looking again at some of these things. So that will be about how we mitigate the loss of income for Parkside when the county council leave. So the asset development programme is key to that and making sure we get the best value from our assets. Service income as well. So things like assistive technology. We obviously have a lifeline service, but there's new technology out there we need to start developing. So there's a whole range of things we do need to look at. And as Dawn said, we're really keen to hear ideas from members and obviously officers within the council as well to feed into that. And that's something we'll want to keep members updated on regularly as we prepare, so that when we get to this time next year, we've got kind of a ready-made set of shovel-ready ideas we can bring forward as part of the budget. And that's very much the plan.
With your okay, Pat. So that means, Roden, you got yes, double up.
Yeah, thanks. Can I just make a comment here? I think in one of the suggestions about the town centre was more benches, you know, that we would hope to have more benches. I think we're one of the few towns where benches disappear. You know, we had more a few years back than we do now. We had more in the marketplace. We had one up Windsor Street. We had one outside Edgerton Lodge. And I think with benches, there are plenty of people who will give us benches, you know, with a memorial thing on. That happens all over the country at no cost. Whenever it's been brought up before, there has been some sort of query about the maintenance cost. But people who are willing to donate a bench, I'm jolly sure that they would be happy to donate some money towards maintenance as well. Just a thought when we're talking about benches. Are there any more hands up, please, Natasha? Where's Natasha? Oh, I can see Natasha. Are there any more hands? Natasha? Is Sarah?
Councillor Cumbers, I think Natasha might be struggling with her connection. I can confirm for you that there's no other hands up.
Oh, there are no other hands. That's fine. Are you sure you've got nothing more to say, Councillor Child?
The only other item I was going to actually raise, Chair, is the budget for responsive repairs and planned maintenance has seen an overall increase of 100,000. I was a bit surprised about that, but thinking about it, am I right in thinking it's mainly due to there being no stock condition survey in place? And if so, when is the survey likely to be completed? If somebody could answer that, I'd be happy, Pat.
Thanks. I'll take that, Pat, if you don't mind.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Alan.
And I'm sure Andrew can back me up. Yeah, you're quite right. We are in the process of doing the stock take as such. I'll hand you over to Andrew in a little minute because he'll tell you where we are with it. But as you're aware, we didn't really have a stock condition. We didn't know where we were. We didn't know the quality, the value of the stock. It was a lot of guesstimates. So I'm sure that's got something to do with it. We are on process of getting it done. Again, the COVID has proven to make that a little bit difficult. But I'll hand over to Andrew. He'll tell you where we are with this next process in our housing situation. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, through you, Councillor Covers, of course. Alan summed it up really well there. Just to expand on that a little bit, you're quite right in terms of our knowledge of the stock and understanding of the stock and the work that's needed. We're very much in the dark, but we do have a really sound plan in place to look at turning that around. So. We want to get into procurement, ASAP, to look at the stock condition survey right across the stock, starting in April. As we then build up the database, a couple of important points in relation to us being able to report on it and that we're measuring absolutely the right things. We can then join that together over the summer, really, with a survey of tenants in terms of their, their aspirations, what they feel about the properties they live in, and tie that in with the sort of financial stuff that we'll get from, Dawn and her colleagues in finance. That'll allow us to pull together a really, good picture in terms of the housing revenue business account, and not only over the next 30 years, but the next sort of 5 years that are really key. So when we're at that point, we'll be able to come back in terms of the budget setting, etc., for next, for the financial year after, and have a really good picture in terms of the capital programs that we need. What's critical, of course, is you get your cyclical maintenance and capital programs that will reduce that responsive repair spend. Far better value for money way of doing it, and it'll also allow us to tie in the stuff coming out of the housing white paper in relation to sort of zero carbon and the future of council housing that the government expects as well.
So ideally, 12 months time, we'll all ship shape.
We'll certainly. We'll be shipshape in terms of knowing what we need to do, and having really good solid plans in place. Yeah, absolutely.
Right, thanks for that. Margaret, Councillor Glancy, you had your hand up a little while ago. Did you mean to ask a question? Or did you want to ask a question?
No, I'm fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. Any other questions are there?
Can I just ask Joe? Pat, can I just ask Joe? Can you remind me, Joe, what the agreed 6,500 in the budget for contract work for the Christmas lights is? It's already been agreed apparently, but I couldn't remember what it was agreed for. What work?
The £6,500.
Yeah, for next year.
Dawn, I have to look at you for a reminder. I was all cleared up a few weeks ago, but not so much now. Dawn, if you could get it factually right for me.
Yeah, sorry. Are you talking about 21, 22?
Yes, 21, 22. The contract work. There's an increase in operating costs of 6,500.
Oh, it's the increase, you mean?
Yeah.
I believe that's because there was wasn't there an agreement to extend the breadth of the lights, Pranali?
No, that was my question.
The lights were extended last Christmas, Bob, and I presume they're going. Well, it's in the same contract for next year as well.
So I'll have to double check on exactly what it is for, but there is cost included, which could have been the 6,000 increase for the operational cost of just putting the lights up and down. I'm not aware because we agreed the extension last year. I don't think this will be about extension. It's about just the normal operational cost, but I will have to double check on that.
Yeah, could you let members know, Pranali, please?
Yeah, we'll get back to you, Bob. You caught us all cold on that one.
Yeah.
Any more hands up, are there, please, Natasha?
No, Councillor Cumbers, there's no more hands raised.
No, right. In which case, that's the end of the debate, and I think we've had a good variety of questions, and I hope you've been satisfied with the responses. And of course, everything we have said will now go to as feedback to the Cabinet when they are considering the budget. So as there is no urgent business. So
Councillor Cumbers, just before you close the meeting, Councillor Orson has his hand raised.
Right, yeah, oh sorry, because I can't see these hands raised. So yes, please, Leader.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pat. I mean, right in a way, actually, who's asked questions. So just a massive thank you to Margaret, Chris, Steve, Malise, Jacob, Jeannie. I've got Chris again, Rob, Bob, Ronan, Pat, and if I've missed anyone, apologies. A big thank you to my lead members. For those of you who are keen on looking on in attendance, sadly Ronnie's had to leave us. He doesn't feel too well tonight. And so he sent his apologies to all of you. He's asked me to convey that to you. Big thank you to Alan. I've been trying to send matchsticks down to Perth for him. His eyes are looking heavier and heavier. And
oh, he's listening.
yeah. And, I mean, it must be, well, it's about 4:45 in the morning, isn't it, Alan, or something like that? I don't know how you've done it, but thank you, Alan, for really making a stoic effort to be with us. Pat, thank you to you. Pat, thank you to you for chairing the meeting so ably and so well, and giving everyone the opportunity to ask questions. And thank you to the officers for their answers and their support to the cabinet members. Like I say, it's been a good night. Scrutiny is always it's an interesting night, as you all know. I'm a massive supporter of Scrutiny. I don't know how many times I say this, but cabinet is only as good as the scrutiny it receives, and scrutiny is only as good as the cabinet. So it really is a hand-in-hand operation. I do believe that. I mean, I have been reminded that I think it was Chris who asked questions on HRA. Could you just say yes or no to Chris on that? Doesn't matter if it's not there. But just to highlight that the capital provision for Lake Terrace and the equipment, IT, etc., is for all the residents, not just town residents. Can I just emphasise that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Other than that, thank you very, very much. Been a good night, and look forward. Like I say, I keep saying look forward to seeing you all, but I just don't know when that's going to be. It can't be till May, can it? So,
but you'll still be seeing us. Yeah, and can I add? Yeah, my thanks to Scrutiny members in particular, but all of you as well, and particular thanks for the officers in democratic services. I mean, obviously, producing these papers has been a huge job, you know, and there's a lot of work involved. And a lot of work, of course, arranging for this meeting. So many thanks to them too. And
just to remind you, Pat, I mean, the budget starts in September for the officers. It's a long time.
Oh yeah, but it's still a lot of work.
Yeah,
it's
huge
ongoing,
amount of work.
A long time and a lot of work. No, nobody could do that in a weekend. So yeah, many thanks and for organising such a good meeting, you know, where things work. So yeah, so I'll bring this meeting to a close then at 20:46 according to my clock.
Thank you very much, Pat. Take care, everyone.
Yeah, take care and see you all soon. And thanks again for coming.